Okay, next up, Joel Pruce. Joel, in addition to having fantastic hair, teaches human rights at the University of Dayton and lives with his family in historic South Park. Joel is also team lead on the Moral Courage Project, an experimental learning and research program launched this year by UD's Human Rights Center. Joel will share the team's work from the first Moral Courage Project trip to Ferguson, Missouri. Please welcome Joel Pruce.
In May, I traveled with 9 students and 2 partners to Ferguson, Missouri, to conduct an oral history project on the theme of moral courage, to find stories of ordinary people who did extraordinary things, who were transformed and in turn transformed their communities during the 2014 uprising that followed the killing of 18-year-old Michael Brown by police officer Darren Wilson. A week prior to our departure, this man, this fraud, this phony, this con man, this carnival barker, called Ferguson one of the most dangerous cities in the United States. We didn't find it to be that exactly. The media depictions we saw 2 years ago were no longer real, but now here we were, outsiders, in over our heads, arriving in a strange place with lots of baggage. The first night we ate at the Ferguson Brewing Company, and over dinner, I whispered Michael Brown's name and wondered if Darren Wilson was sitting at the bar. I felt like I was stumbling through a movie set, nervous to bump into the movies. Not surreal, but hyperreal, as if the alienated experience of learning about a place from a distance failed entirely to teach me anything about it. The town felt wounded, wrapped in a mundane and unremarkable landscape. Not urban, depressingly suburban, in fact. Ferguson is one of 92 towns surrounding St. Louis, built to enable white flight in the 70s, and in order to sustain these towns, predatory policing targets black people, extracting revenue and terrorizing innocent people. No matter who we spoke with, the ghost of Michael Brown hung heavy. I didn't meet a single person that actually knew Mike, but everyone felt close to him. They knew his life, thought of him as a catalyst or a martyr. And the single most repeated story we heard was of the humiliation for the community when Mike's dead body was left in the middle of the street for 4.5 hours on a hot Midwest August day. Crowds gathered, his mom not allowed to approach her son, who laid uncovered, and when a white sheet finally emerged, it wasn't large enough, leaving Mike's high tops to stick out the bottom. No ambulances were available. They were all doing something more important that afternoon. Multiple people told us that a cop's dog urinated on the blood-soaked asphalt, now beset by flowers, and dog piss. So here we are, a diverse group of 12 outsiders walking into a volatile space, still simmering after nearly 2 years. But would people talk to us? Would they open up to us and help us understand why they did what they did? Would they trust us with their truths? Valerie Felix was 12 years old when Michael Brown was killed. And at a time when most young people try their hardest to blend in and shield themselves from public judgment, Valerie protested. She lost friends at school and at church, but held strong to what she knew was right. A truly admirable young woman with a lot to teach us. Darrell Meese is a Christian pastor who set about bringing his ministry to the streets by listening to the concerns of both protesters and police, by diffusing tension and unsafe situations, and by forging community based on mediation and dialogue. This was his calling. Darrell is an unsung hero who never sought recognition for his efforts, but whose efforts continue. Rachel Prouty grew up in Ferguson and moved to Louisiana for college and work and then to pursue a doctorate in education. She saw the events in light of her experience during Hurricane Katrina as yet another glaring failure of American public institutions to respond effectively to black suffering. Rachel moved back to Ferguson in 2016 and plans to run for mayor. Elizabeth Vega is a Chicana artist and poet, and when protests erupted, she turned a rundown house in North City into a co-op where protesters could eat and sleep. At the house, they created banners and cooked for each other from the communal garden. Elizabeth is currently facing up to a year in jail for wiping pepper spray that was shot at her face on the shirt of the St. Louis Chief of Police. Tori Russell is founder of Hands Up United, a community organization that runs a food pantry and a library and hosts programs that teach radical black history to the youth. Before August 9th, Tori worked in and out of factories and recalled his life as a professional bum. Tori describes being in the streets those weeks and months as a soulful awakening and as a full expression of freedom. Darren Seals was found shot to death in a burning car 2 weeks ago, a dozen miles from his home. A union worker and community leader, Darren forcefully resisted the co-optation of the Ferguson movement. I didn't meet Darren personally, but I had listened to our interview with him just prior to his murder. News of his death brought everything into sharp relief and tested my understanding of what we had done. Monica Tyson introduced us to Darren. Monica lives in St. Louis, and during Ferguson, she deliberately went to the young men in the streets wearing undershirts with braids, bandanas, and sagging jeans and asked them for their ideas. She knew that Darren couldn't get audiences that she could. His language was too brash and his perspective too radical. We tried to get close to people. We tried to cultivate trust, but at some point we were going to return home, bringing these stories with us and leaving behind the day-to-day that people like Darren were burdened with. We can learn from him and learn about him, but we are not him. We are not like him. We are not close to him. When he was murdered, I followed tweets of his comrades grieving, but what I felt was not grief but detachment. How can I rightly grieve someone I didn't know? Part of the loss I feel is the hopelessness that another dead black man brings to a community of protesters on whose backs this country was carried. The spirit of Ferguson empowered us as a nation to demand police accountability, and we owe them an enormous debt. How do you intend to pay it? Darren's murder opened a deeper loss due to my returning sense of distance to the people I met, the community that embraced us, and the people's struggle that we left behind. My loss was of my connection to a place replaced by the reminder that whatever our good intentions, Darren lived a life that I don't. His comrades survive him and keep grinding. All I do is read about it now and feel things. And bridging this distance is hard. It might be impossible. Maybe solidarity is a fiction we invent to make us feel as though we're connected to others when we're really not. I hope that's not the case, and I act as if it's not, because a world of solidarity can only be willed into existence through our work and our commitments as a practiced reality. Stories are bridge-building tools, both in the process of taking testimony as well as in the obligation to share someone else's story responsibly. We shared experiences with our interviewees that bind us, but stories are only the first step in constructing solidarity. The openings created by stories must move us beyond how we feel to impact how we live. Ferguson taught me the depths of what the unjust world demands of us. Ferguson protesters disrupted their lives, upended jobs, strained families and relationships in order to show us all the way. Solidarity, if it's about anything, is about sacrifice and dedication. And our demand is to discover how far we are each willing to go, to act courageously, to transform and be transformed in order to improve our societies and the lives of others. Thank you.
Whoa. I love what he said. Solidarity is about sacrifice and dedication. I thought that was really good. Thank you, Joel, for giving us another perspective on what happened in Ferguson.